Have you ever felt that you have too many dreams, but none of them ever come true? You tell yourself you'll change, you'll start, you'll break through, but the next day, everything feels the same. It's not because you're lazy, it's because you don't know where to start. I've met so many people like that, people with great ideas, perfect plans, and big dreams. But they forget one thing: dreams don't need more details, they need the first action. Like a seed in the ground. It's not loud, not flashy, but each day it grows just a little, and one morning it breaks through the soil and becomes life. Your life is the same. You don't need a giant leap, you just need one small step in the right direction. Jim Rohn once said, "You don't have to be great to start, but you have to start to be great." That quote completely changed the way I see success. I realized that successful people are not different from us in their dreams. They're different in how they begin. They don't wait, they act, even if it's just one small thing today. And in this video, I'll share with you 7 principles to help you turn vague dreams into concrete actions to take you from wanting to doing, from dreaming to reality. Because sometimes the very first step you hesitate to take is the one that determines the entire journey. And you should stay until the end of the video, because principle #7 is the secret every successful person understands and every failure overlooks. Principle beer, your brain doesn't fear action. It fears overwhelm. I once asked a friend, "Why haven't you started the plan you've been talking about for 3 years?" He sighed, "Because it's too big, Jim. I don't know where to start." I smiled, because I knew that feeling. I used to be like that too. We're not afraid of action. We're afraid of things that feel too big. The human brain has a fascinating mechanism. It fears what is too vague, too distant, too hard to grasp. When you say, "I want to be successful," your brain doesn't know what successful means. It only sees a blurry picture and immediately triggers fear. And then, instead of moving forward, you stop. You start finding excuses, postponing plans, telling yourself it's not the right time. I remember the first time I decided to change my life. Back then, I was a failing salesman, in debt, almost out of hope. I wanted success, but every time I thought about becoming rich, I felt overwhelmed. It was too big, too far, too different from where I was. Then I learned one thing. The brain doesn't fear small steps. It fears dreams without a clear starting point. Instead of setting a goal like become rich, I changed it to, "I'll read one book about finance in 7 days." Instead of becoming a famous speaker, I told myself, "I'll talk to 3 people today about something I learned." When I broke my dream into smaller pieces, the fear disappeared. I felt lighter, clearer, and most importantly, I took action immediately. You see, the first step doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be real. Your brain needs a signal that you're moving forward, even just 1 millimeter. One small action can open the door to hundreds of others. It's like climbing a mountain. No one conquers Everest by staring at the sky and dreaming. They look down at their boots and take a step, just one step, and everything begins to move. I often tell my students, "You don't need to see the whole staircase, just take the first step." Quote. Why? Because when you move, confidence rises, fear decreases, and something magical happens. You start believing that you can. A young entrepreneur once told me, "I have a startup idea, but I'm not ready. I need more time." I asked, "More time for what?" He went silent. I said, "You don't need more time. You need one small action, call one customer, build one prototype. You'll learn more in 1 day of action than in 100 days of thinking." That's how the brain is trained. Small action creates control, creates motivation, leads to bigger action. If you stand still, fear grows tenfold in your head. I once said, when you procrastinate, fear doesn't go away, it grows. And conversely, when you act, fear loses its power. So if you're facing a goal that feels overwhelming, don't try to eat the whole elephant. Cut it into pieces. Start with the smallest thing you can do today. Maybe it's writing down 3 tasks. Maybe it's sending that first email, or simply waking up 30 minutes earlier. Your brain reacts differently when it sees something doable. And in that very moment, you begin to win against yourself. Take a few seconds and ask yourself, what is something I've dreamed about for years but never started because it felt too big? If something just came to mind, here's your reminder. Do one small thing for it today. And that's just the beginning, because in Principle #2, I'll show you how to turn those big abstract dreams into specific, actionable steps, so you don't just want, you actually make it happen. Principle 2. Break your dream into small tasks. I often tell my students, there's no such thing as a dream that's too big, only thinking that's too vague. Quote, you can dream of being an entrepreneur, a creator, an inspiration to others, or simply living a better life. But if you don't break that dream into specific steps, it's like a building without blueprints, beautiful in imagination, but collapsing in reality. I remember in my early years, I wanted to write a book about life philosophy. I bought paper, pens, even a new desk. But day after day, I wrote nothing. Not because I lacked inspiration, but because I was trying to write the entire book in one morning. Until I asked myself, what's the smallest thing I can do today? The answer was simple, write 500 words. So I did. Day 1, 500 words. Day 2, another 500. A month later, nearly 15,000 words. And a year later, I had the first draft of the book that changed my life. The magic wasn't in the number 500. The magic was that I started and stayed consistent. Remember this, success doesn't come from one big leap, but from thousands of small steps repeated over time. People often see the mountain peak of others' success and forget the countless small rocks they climb before reaching it. You see a speaker talking to thousands, but not the hundreds of talks with only 5 people. You see a successful entrepreneur, but not the nights spent fixing the first prototype. The world admires the outcome, but it's the quiet, repeated small steps that build greatness. Once I was coaching a group of young entrepreneurs. One asked me, Jim, how do I make $1 million in 5 years? I asked back, have you made your first 100 yet? He went silent. I smiled and said, if you can't make 100, you'll never understand how to make 1 million. That's what I call the small doubling principle. Do the small thing well, then double it. Write 1 page a day, 365 pages a year. 1 book. Save $5 a day, $1,800 a year, $9,000 in 5 years. Small things accumulate into big results. But the hardest part isn't the math, it's the mindset of breaking things down. Unsuccessful people look at goals and ask, how can I ever achieve that? Successful people ask, what small step can I take today to get closer? Change your question, and you'll be surprised how possible everything becomes. One of my students, a young woman, always dreamed of starting her own fashion brand. She said, I have no money, no experience, no connections. I asked, what do you have right now? She said, a phone and an Instagram account. I said, good. Start by sharing 1 piece of clothing you love and tell its story. 3 months later, she had 10,000 followers. A year later, she opened her first store. And you know what? She didn't start with a brand, she started with a post. Small actions opened the door to her big dream. I want you to remember this. Any goal can be achieved if you're patient enough to break it into small steps. Don't try to complete your whole life in one day. Just do today well. Because if you live each day fully, you'll be amazed at how far you've come. It's like building a house. You don't lay the whole wall at once. You lay 1 brick as perfectly as you can, and then you repeat that every day. After a year, you have a wall. After a few years, you have a house. But if you just keep staring at the blueprint, dreaming of the structure, you'll end up with nothing but a piece of paper. So today, if you're dreaming about something, write down the smallest thing you can do right now. And do it. That's how you turn dreams into action. Not through giant leaps, but through small steps repeated day after day. But remember, starting is one thing, staying consistent is another. And that's exactly what I'll share with you in Principle #3. Start first. Inspiration will follow. I told him, write your first post, even if it's just a few lines, and publish it. A week later, he did. No one read it. The next week, he wrote again 5 readers. A month later, 500. And a year later, he had tens of thousands of loyal followers. He told me, Jim, if I had waited for inspiration, I might have never started. I smiled and said, no one ever feels ready before doing something important. Inspiration comes after you overcome laziness through action. Let me remind you of this. Inspiration isn't a reward, it's a result. When you act, you change your state. When you change your state, you change your emotions. And when you change your emotions, you gain strength. So next time you find yourself procrastinating, tell yourself, I don't need inspiration, I just need 5 minutes of action. Just 5 minutes and the energy will come. Inspiration isn't far away. It lives in the very moment you begin. And that's the third key in this journey. But remember, inspiration only matters if you know how to sustain it. So in Principle Hash 4, I'll share with you the secret of those who not only start strong, but stay consistent to the end, the principle called discipline turns small steps into great power. Principle 3. Start first. Inspiration will come after. I used to believe that to do something big, I needed to feel inspired. I waited until I felt excited, ready, full of energy. And then I realized the days when inspiration shows up are rare. Most of the time, we don't feel inspired at all. We're tired, we worry, we hesitate, we wait. But while we're waiting, others are already taking action. And it's in action that inspiration is born. I realized this on a freezing winter morning in Idaho. I had a big talk coming up, but I wasn't in the mood to prepare. I told myself, I'll write when I feel inspired. 3 hours passed. I was still sitting there, not a single line written. Finally, I stood up, made a cup of coffee, and said to myself, all right, I'll just write for 5 minutes, no inspiration needed. And then those 5 minutes became 30 minutes. 30 minutes turned into 3 hours. When I finished, I'd written nearly the entire speech. I smiled and realized inspiration doesn't come before action, it comes after. Most people think, I need inspiration to start. But successful people understand, I start to create inspiration. It's like riding a bike. At first, the wheel is heavy, but after a few turns, it starts rolling on its own. Action is the same. It's hard at the beginning, but once you get going, energy appears, motivation rises, and you move forward. A young student once asked me, teacher, how do I maintain motivation every day? I replied, don't try to maintain motivation, maintain action. Because motivation is a feeling, and feelings change. But action, if programmed into a habit, creates results, and results will feed your feelings. I once had a simple habit. Every morning, I read 10 pages. At first, I had to force myself to open the book. But gradually, I realized those pages gave me an energy no cup of coffee could provide. And so, the habit became a joy. A small action became a great source of inspiration. People often say, I'll exercise when I feel motivated. But if you exercise first, motivation will find you. That's the paradoxical principle of success. It's not inspiration that creates action, it's action that creates inspiration. I once said, don't wish it were easier, wish you were stronger. And to become stronger, you have to start even when you're not inspired. Mid-video CTA, keep viewers engaged. If you feel these lessons truly resonate with you, hit subscribe to continue the journey with me, where we'll explore the principles that help you go further every day. Because success isn't something you wait for, it's something you create, one small step at a time. An entrepreneur I coached once proved this clearly. He wanted to blog about business knowledge, but kept saying he wasn't ready. I told him, write the first post, even if it's just a few lines, and publish it. A week later, he posted his first article. No one read it. The next week, he wrote a second 5 readers. A month later, 500. And a year later, he had tens of thousands of loyal readers. He told me, Jim, if I'd waited for inspiration, I might never have started. Kunit. I laughed and said, no one feels ready before doing something important. Inspiration appears only after you act through laziness. Let me remind you of this. Inspiration is not a reward, it's a result. When you act, you change your state. When you change your state, you change your emotions. And when you change your emotions, you create strength. So next time you find yourself procrastinating, tell yourself, I don't need inspiration, I just need 5 minutes of action. Just 5 minutes and the rest, the energy will come on its own. Inspiration isn't far away. It lives in the very moment you begin. And that's the third key on this journey. But remember, inspiration only matters if you know how to sustain it. So in Principle Hash 4, I'll share with you the secret of those who not only start strong, but remain steadfast to the end, the principle called, discipline turns small steps into great power. Quote, Principle dirt, discipline turns small steps into great power. I once said, discipline is the bridge between goals and accomplishment. Because you can have dreams and take action, but without discipline, everything stops after the first few days of excitement. I've met so many people who start strong, then quit quietly. Not because they lack ability, but because they can't maintain the pace. Let me tell you a story. That year, I decided to change myself by waking up early every morning. Day 1, I was full of energy. Day 2, I had to force myself out of bed. Day 3, I started making excuses. And by day 4, I was sleeping in again. I realized inspiration helps you start, but discipline helps you go far. Discipline is something most people know they need, but very few truly live by. Why? Because discipline doesn't deliver instant results. It's a quiet seed, and only the patient witness it bloom. I remember asking one of my classes, "Can you read a whole book in one day?" Everyone shook their heads. I asked again, "Then how about 10 pages a day?" Everyone nodded. I said, "If you do that for 365 days, you'll read 3,650 pages, about 10 books." The room fell silent. I continued, "The problem isn't ability. The problem is consistency." Successful people aren't the ones who do many things. They're the ones who do one thing many times. A small action, repeated daily, becomes tremendous power. They understand that discipline isn't punishment. It's the freedom to choose the direction of your life. It's like training muscles. Each day you do 10 reps small. Yes, but after 6 months, you're much stronger. If you do 100 reps in one day and then skip a month, you get nowhere. Life works the same way. Steady accumulation always beats short bursts. One day, a friend told me, "Jim, I can't keep a journaling habit. I forget." I asked, "Where do you keep your notebook?" He said, "In a drawer." I said, "That's the reason. Put it right on your desk where you see it every morning." Discipline isn't willpower. It's an environment that supports action. When you arrange your life so discipline becomes easy, you no longer have to fight yourself. You simply live by a system. And here's one of the most important lessons I've learned. Discipline doesn't kill freedom. It creates freedom. When you have financial discipline, you gain financial freedom. When you have study discipline, you gain freedom and knowledge. When you have discipline with your body, you gain freedom in energy and health. Every freedom is built on the foundation of discipline. I know there will be days you feel tired. There will be days you want to quit. I've been there too. But it's precisely the days you keep going when you don't want to that shape who you are. That's the moment you're training a quiet power, the power of consistency. Picture this. A drop of water falls on a rock. At first, nothing changes. But over time, that drop carves into the stone, not because of force, but because of perseverance. You don't need to be stronger than others. You just need to be more consistent than the you of yesterday. I often advise my students, don't try to change your whole life in one day. Just change one small behavior and keep it for 30 days. One changed behavior leads to another. Gradually, you build a new identity. Because when you practice discipline long enough, you're no longer practicing discipline, you become a disciplined person. And that's when your life changes direction. And if you truly find what I share helpful, please like this video to help spread the message to more people. Who knows, your one small action today might inspire someone to start changing their life. Discipline is what turns small actions into lasting strength. But for discipline to fully work, you have to dare to move forward even when you're not ready. And that's exactly what I'll share in Principle #5, act even when you're not ready. Principle 5, act even when you're not ready. I've met many people who told me, "Jim, I'll start when I'm ready." I asked back, "When is that?" They often went silent, stared off and said, "Maybe when things are more stable." But you know what? That ready day will never come. If I had waited until I had enough money, enough skills, enough confidence, I might never have stepped onto that first stage of my life. I still remember that day clearly, trembling hands, a hoarse voice, and dozens of eyes on me. I wasn't ready, but I did it. And that very action, imperfect but courageous, opened the path I still walk today. I used to tell my students, you don't need to see the whole road. You just need to walk the part you can see. Many people never start because they want a perfect plan. But life doesn't work that way. You can't learn to swim by standing on the shore reading about water. You have to jump into the pool to feel it, to be clumsy, to choke a little, and then you learn to float. Likewise, you can't learn to succeed by waiting for the right time, because there is no time more perfect than now. I once met a man who said for 10 years that he wanted to start his own company. He had ideas, contacts, a bit of capital, but he waited until he had more experience. 10 years later, he was in the same place, and someone else had executed his idea. He told me, "Jim, I should have started earlier." I replied, "There is no should have. There is action, or there is nothing. What about you? Is there something you've said you will do for years, but still haven't started because you don't feel ready?" The truth is, no one is ever truly ready. Even the most successful people I've met started with anxiety, with lack, and full of doubts. But they started in spite of that because they understood. Action creates readiness, not the other way around. Not confident, act, and confidence will come. Don't have the skills? Start, and skills will form. Don't know everything? That's fine, go, and the road will open. I once had a young student named Daniel. He dreamed of becoming a speaker but was afraid to stand in front of a crowd. I asked, "Daniel, what's the worst that could happen?" He said, "I'm afraid they'll laugh, criticize, judge." I smiled and said, "Good. Then let them laugh, at least you stood up." The next week, he spoke to a small class. His hands shook, his voice cracked, but he did it. 2 years later, Daniel became a professional speaker, giving talks in many countries. He told me, "Jim, I was never ready. I just started." Cool. That story reminds me of one thing. Life doesn't wait for anyone to be ready. It only waits for those who dare to step out of their comfort zone. If you wait until you're no longer afraid, you'll wait forever. Because courage doesn't come from the absence of fear, it comes from acting while still afraid. I want you to pause for a moment and ask yourself, is there something I'm delaying just because I don't feel ready? Write it down, and then take the smallest step you can for it today. Send an email, publish a post, make a phone call, or simply speak your dream out loud to someone. That small action could change the direction of your entire life. And when you do it, you'll realize something wonderful. You're stronger than you think. You're smarter than you believe. And you've been ready for a long time, you just hadn't started. Remember this, don't wait for perfection to start. Starting is what makes things become perfect. And that's the turning point for every successful person. They don't wait for favorable conditions, they create them. But to make this journey truly sustainable, you need one more crucial element acknowledging every small bit of progress. So in Principle #6, I'll share with you, acknowledge progress, no matter how small. Principle, alter, acknowledge progress, no matter how small. I once had a very diligent student named Sarah. She always gave her best, worked nonstop, learned every day, yet she constantly complained, "Teacher, I don't feel like I'm making any progress." I asked, "Do you record what you've accomplished?" She shook her head. I smiled and said, "Sarah, if you only look at the road ahead, you'll always feel like you're not enough. But if you look back at the path you've traveled, you'll realize you've gone farther than you thought." You see, our brains tend to overlook small progress. They're always seeking big rewards, big results, big success. And that's exactly why we get discouraged, because big results often come very slowly. I once fell into that loop. When I first began my journey to change my life, I read, I worked, I studied every day. But for weeks, I didn't see anything change. And I started to doubt myself. I asked, are my efforts meaningless? Then one day, I opened my notebook where I had written down the small things I learned each day. I flipped back to the first pages and realized I had changed a lot. Different mindset, different habits, the way I spoke, the way I looked at life, all different. I realized it's not the outcome that transforms you, it's the process. And every small step deserves to be acknowledged. I started a simple habit. Every evening, I wrote down 3 things I accomplished that day, no matter how small. Read 10 pages, exercise for 15 minutes, or simply didn't give up. When I wrote them down, I felt proud. And when I felt proud, I wanted to do more. That changed my energy. I no longer worked from fear, but from the joy of progress. Have you noticed that when you play a game, every time you pass a small level, your brain releases excitement? That's dopamine, the brain's natural reward for progress. If you can create that feeling in life, you'll never run out of motivation. So instead of only looking at your 10-year goal, look at today's step forward. Because success isn't a distant destination, it's the hundreds of days. You do one small thing right. I once said in a speech, achievements don't come from doing great things, but from doing small things greatly every day. A friend of mine, a successful entrepreneur, once shared, whenever his company hit a milestone, no matter how small, he celebrated, not to show off, but to honor the journey. He said, "If I only celebrated at the peak, I'd miss hundreds of small wins along the way." And I believe that's true in every area of life. Marriage, health, learning, finances, all are chains of small progress. If you only look at where you want to be, you'll feel disappointed. But if you look back at where you started, you'll feel grateful. So today, I want you to do one thing. Take 5 minutes, open a notebook or your phone, and write down 3 things you accomplished this week. Even if it's just a small step, it's still progress. Then read them out loud. You'll feel the magic. You're not standing still, you're moving forward. Remember this well. If you don't learn to appreciate small steps, you'll never have the patience to finish the big journey. When you know how to acknowledge progress, you begin to see life through the lens of gratitude, and that gratitude is the fuel that carries you farther than any burst of inspiration. But there's something even more powerful than progress itself. It's turning those small steps into part of who you are. And that's what I'll share in Principle #7, Small Habits Create a Big Identity. Principle 7, Small Habits Create a Big Identity. I once said in a speech, when you repeat an action long enough, it's no longer something you do, it becomes who you are. And I believe that's the greatest power of small steps. I once met a young man who came to me with determined eyes. He said, "Jim, I want to be disciplined. I want to live like successful people." I asked, "So what did you do today that a disciplined person would do?" He was silent. You see, identity isn't a goal. It's the result of habits repeated over time. You don't learn to become disciplined. You act like a disciplined person a little more each day. If you wake up early every morning, read a few pages, exercise, keep promises to yourself, you are gradually becoming someone who lives with discipline. If you're honest in small things, you're becoming a person of integrity. If you help others without expecting anything back, you're becoming a kind person. Every small action is a vote for the person you want to become. And the great thing is you can cast new votes every day. Each morning you have a choice. Live by the old identity or write a new one. When I was young, I didn't have much. No money, no status, no reputation. But I had a choice. I could live like a failure or start acting like a successful person. And I chose action. I woke up earlier, worked harder, read more, learned more. No one saw, no one applauded, no one recognized it. But I knew each of those actions was rebuilding who I was. And one day when I looked back, I no longer had to act like a successful person. I had become that person. Look at any great person you admire. None of them woke up one morning and became different overnight. They simply kept doing the right things over and over. Like a seed, it doesn't grow into a tree after one day of watering. But if you water it consistently, care for it every day, it grows strong, and one day you'll be surprised. When did it get so tall? Life is the same. Your habits are the soil that nourishes your life. If you sow good actions each day, you'll reap a strong, confident, trustworthy identity. I once said, don't dream of becoming a successful person. Act like one and you'll become them. If you want good health, live like someone with good health. If you want wealth, live like someone who manages money well. If you want peace, live like someone who practices gratitude and letting go. There's no magic that transforms your life, only small habits repeated in silence. And then one morning you wake up and realize you no longer have to force yourself to live with discipline. You are a disciplined person. You no longer have to strain to maintain motivation, because motivation has become your natural rhythm. That's when you know, I haven't just changed my life, I've changed myself. I once met Sarah, again, the student, who used to complain she wasn't improving enough. This time she smiled and said, "Teacher, I've kept a habit of writing for 15 minutes a day for a whole year." I asked, "And how do you feel now?" She said, "I don't have to try to write anymore, teacher. I am a writer." I smiled, because that is the true goal of every growth journey. Not to do more, but to become someone else. Remember this philosophy. Habits don't just change what you do, they change who you become. And once you build that new identity, you'll realize success is no longer something you chase. It's the natural result of who you are becoming each day. And now, to close this journey, I want to summarize all the lessons with you and share a final message and note from Jim Rohn to those who truly want to change their lives. Let's go to the final part. Action message and the promise to wake up. I know you have big dreams. Maybe it's financial freedom, the work you love, a better version of yourself. But remember, everything great begins with the smallest steps. You don't need to change the whole world today. Just change one action, one habit, one choice. Because when you do that small thing every day, it multiplies into something big. I was once an ordinary young man, no reputation, no direction. But I learned this. If I move forward just 1% each day, then a year from now, I'll be 365% different from today. And that's the truth of life. No one succeeds because of a giant leap. They succeed because they persisted with small steps. I want you to pause for a moment. Take a deep breath and ask yourself, what is the smallest step I can take today to get closer to my dream? Maybe it's reading 10 pages. Maybe it's waking up 30 minutes earlier. Or simply stopping the daydreaming and starting to act. Because you know what? Every small step you take today is a declaration to the universe. I'm serious about my life. And when you're serious, the world responds with new doors. If you truly feel these ideas touch your heart, please hit like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who needs a reminder to start. And don't forget to leave a comment. I'm starting today. Write it down as a commitment to yourself. Success isn't the result of one great day, but the reward for hundreds of ordinary days when you didn't give up. You and I share the same gift today. Use it wisely. I'll see you in the next video. Don't just dream about the life you want. Start building it, one small step at a time.